So going back to the very early part of our conversation, we were talking, we were talking about some of the orders of magnitude shifts. You mentioned communication and influencing being a really key part of that, and then now here we're talking kind of a broader vehicle of that, of being able to really have clear communication about where we're going, the challenges that we're facing, and then to align everybody around that. And then you were also talking about like being a technologist at heart and wanting to be able to like really master the different technologies that you're working with, but that being a dilemma. So it kind of goes to a good, I think, tension point that we were talking about, which is that dilemma between sort of the high level vision setting, seeing things from 10,000 feet, to being close to the details and leading, at that micro level. Talk to me about like your approach or how you balance that dilemma, or what you experience there.
Yeah, no, honestly, this is something I'm still trying to figure out. So, one of my challenges is still trying to find the right level of granularity, so to speak, in terms of the updates. Like, how deep am I going into all the different things that the organization is doing? Right. Clearly, I've got sort of a high level thing, but what I'm still trying to work out is like when people are giving me updates on what they're working on and or project reviews. Like, actually, first of all, which project reviews do I need to be in versus not? What level of depth they need to go into versus not? And this is something I still struggle with. I feel like, and I don't know again if this is how much of my background as a technologist influences this, because it does. I frankly feel a little bit unmoored, so to speak, if I don't have that sort of detail, right? But at the same time, I realize there's no way I can get that level of detail about everything that we're doing across 2,300 people. There's just a lot going on, and so I got to sort of figure out that balance. So it's honestly still something I'm working on, and I don't have the magic formula for it yet. We're definitely trying a lot of different experiments in terms of that. I guess the other thing I'll say is I like getting into the details. I like seeing how the technologies work, and so that's also the thing that's troubling for me, is that I just can't do that for everything. So I'm still trying to figure it out because obviously we only have so much time in a day. And how do I balance that versus many of the other things that I need to do?
So, kind of related to this, the dilemma, one of the questions I wanted to ask was diving a little bit deeper into sort of the influencing side of things, and so more on like the one-to-one relationship, like either helping guide or influence sort of an outcome in a way where it's not directly telling somebody to do X.
Yep.
Can you share like when you're like trying to consider one of those sort of influence-oriented decisions, what's your approach there?
So first thing is, if I want someone to do something for reals, then I'm getting to the mode where I just tell them to do it rather than necessarily try to influence them. Sometimes I find people, like leaders, will be kind of in this weird state where they really want something and just to get it done, but they're trying to sort of be nice, overly nice about it. Sometimes it's easier to say, "Hey, this is what I want you to do." Now, in other situations, what I try to do there on the influencing front, one of the interesting things about the CTO organization that we have is that there's so many different disciplines across it, right? We've got people doing kind of academic research. We've got ESG teams, like experts on sustainability. We've got folks doing, fundamental cloud services that support the rest of the organization. We've got people doing FinOps. So you got people kind of all over the place doing all sorts of different stuff, right? And the reason I bring that up is because these people are experts in those areas, and I am not. So that's something I've got to be very cognizant of. So I'm going to talk to them saying, "Hey, I think we should do this, or we should go this direction." What I try to focus on is what's the outcome or the benefit that I'm looking for, I'm thinking about here, right? And leaving the how as much as possible up to them. But I'm also open to being challenged. And again, this is where the feedback thing becomes so important. And I find oftentimes that I don't really fully understand the space in the way that they do. And so I'm saying, here's kind of what we want. Here's how I think we should do it. And they're like, because sometimes I naturally do that, even though I try not to. But then they'll say, no, that doesn't make sense. Here's how we should really be thinking about it. And so that back and forth actually creates a better solution in the end. Now, the other thing I'll say is that sometimes I'll go and tell someone something, and it's not really a misunderstanding that they just disagree. They say, no, I don't think we should do it. So then I've got to decide, okay, how much of that do I leave to their discretion? And how much do I sort of try to override it? And that's a really tough one as well. I talked about guardrails before.
Yeah.
And there's going to be certain guardrails that we're going to drive. So if this is a guardrail topic, I'm going to say, I'm sorry you feel differently, but we're going to do it, right? And so again, you have to figure out how you're going to do it, but we're going to do it. If it's something that's more specific, like maybe a strategy discussion for their team or something like that, then I'm going to defer more to them. And if they say, no, I don't think it's a good idea, then I'll say, okay. It'd be less likely I'd override that. So I think but then the question becomes, what do you consider a guardrail thing versus not? And so that's something that, I'm trying to lead the team through a bit of a change about is that, hey, like it's not, do anything you want. You can do a lot of what you want, but within these constructs and these some confines, right? So that's kind of how I think about it at a high level.
Can you share a little bit more about what you mean by guardrail, just to give a sense of what that looks like concretely?
Yeah. So like one of the things that we at VMware have done when you look at our organizational structure, so we got these business units, and the business units were originally created to provide autonomy and speed, right? That we have these different businesses, storage and network and core virtualization. So they need to be able to go do their own thing. So what you find is that as that structure has evolved over time, that each of the BUs are somewhat siloed, right? There's some interconnection, of course, but they also kind of do their own thing, make their own technology decisions and so forth. And so what that's created is this problem we have today where we have a lot of these different technologies that are out there across the BUs. Now, Octo sits at the center of that. And we're trying to drive more standardization because that's where we see, like, when you go into SaaS, cloud services, like this integration becomes super, super important. And so what we're trying to do is, like, for instance, some of these guardrails around what can you as a business do and not do in terms of what services that you use. Can you build your own, or do you have to use the ones that, we in Octo create? And so there's, that's like an example of a guardrail. There's also other sorts of guardrails, like we're talking about right now within the team is around how do we do budget management, especially in these kind of lean times that we're in as an industry. Everyone's budget's tightening a bit. And so I think there's a question of how much do I allow my staff and their teams just to manage to their own budget versus how much do we sort of centralize it and allow and look at it as kind of a single Octo budget that then gives us a bit more agility to move things between teams when necessary. So that would be an example of guardrails there as well. Another guardrail that we have is around some of our hiring practices. So, for instance, we require that the candidate slate have a certain set of folks, right? We have to have at least one person who identifies as a woman, at least one person who identifies as an underrepresented minority, to ensure that we're getting the best diversity possible, right? And that's a guardrail. You got to go do that, and if you don't, then there's an issue there. So there's some of these different types of things. There's we have things around T&E, and there's different sorts of these things. So that's kind of what I mean by guardrails, and they can be any sorts of things, company level things or team level things. And I think what we're trying to do, as I mentioned, is institute a bit more sort of Octo level guardrails where it makes sense.